I spent 40 years serving this country from the blistering deserts overseas to the quiet valleys back home, and when I finally retired, all I wanted was peace. My ranch became my sanctuary, acres of golden pasture, horses grazing under the morning sun, and the sound of wind whistling through the pines. It was perfect until she showed up. Her name was Olivia Adams, self-appointed queen of the HOA, armed with a clipboard and an ego the size of Texas. She marched up my driveway, heels clicking like a drill sergeant, and announced, "This property violates community standards. You need to vacate immediately." I told her calmly, "Ma'am, I built this land before your HOA even had a name." She smirked. "Then it's time to modernize." That was the moment I realized this wasn't just a power trip, it was a declaration of war. And if she wanted a war, she picked the wrong veteran. Before we dive in, tell me where you're watching from, your city and local time, and make sure to subscribe for more wild HOA stories just like this one. I've always believed that peace is earned, not granted. After decades in the Marines, I'd seen enough chaos to last 3 lifetimes. So when I bought this land 20 years ago, I built it into a quiet retreat where the loudest thing you'd hear was the sound of the windmill creaking against the morning breeze. My days were simple: feed the horses, fix a fence, ride the ATV down the property line at sunset just to watch the deer move across the hills. My nearest neighbors were half a mile away, retirees, families, and a couple of ranchers who shared my respect for space and privacy. Life out here wasn't about control, it was about coexistence. Then the subdivisions started creeping in. What used to be open fields turned into rows of modern community homes, white fences, perfect lawns, and matching mailboxes that all screamed uniformity. And with them came the inevitable, the homeowners association. At first, it didn't concern me. My property sat outside their initial boundary. I wasn't under their jurisdiction, and I intended to keep it that way. But the HOA had other ideas. One afternoon, I got a letter slipped under my gate. No postage, no signature, just a printed notice from something called the Silver Creek Estates HOA. It said my barn was non-compliant with color standards, my perimeter fence posed visual disharmony, and my display of military signage needed to be approved by the aesthetic committee. I laughed so hard, I nearly spilled my coffee. Aesthetic committee. On a working ranch, I called the number listed at the bottom. A cheerful voice answered, "Silver Creek HOA office, this is Cheryl speaking." I explained politely that my property predated their subdivision and wasn't part of their development plan. Cheryl paused, then said, "Oh, I'll let the president know." That was my first interaction with Olivia Adams. A week later, she showed up in person. Bright pink suit, oversized sunglasses, clipboard tucked like a weapon under her arm. The kind of woman who smiled without meaning it. "Good morning," she said in that tight, sugary voice. "I'm here regarding your property." I wiped my hands on my jeans. "You must be Olivia. I heard you're running the neighborhood council." "Correction," she said. "I am the HOA president. And we've had several complaints about your property's rustic appearance." "Rustic," I repeated, raising an eyebrow. "It's a ranch." "Yes, well, Silver Creek is moving toward a unified aesthetic. White barns, matching shutters, no visible equipment from the street, and definitely no," she looked at my gate sign, "Semper Fi Ranch. That's military branding, against community code." I let out a quiet chuckle. "Ma'am, this land isn't in your community. It's on federal record, purchased long before your HOA existed." She smiled wider, the kind of smile that meant trouble. "Boundaries can change, Colonel. The county just approved a new zoning alignment. Your land now falls within Silver Creek's influence area." "Influence," I said, "isn't the same as authority." Her tone sharpened. "We'll see what the board says." And just like that, she left, leaving a faint cloud of perfume and a storm brewing behind her. Over the next month, the letters kept coming. Final warning, notice of violation, pending penalty assessment, each one more ridiculous than the last. My barn roof was too reflective. My horse corral was a safety concern for nearby homeowners. Even the American flag on my porch was non-standard in proportion. I started keeping them in a folder labeled comedy material. The neighbors began whispering. Some were sympathetic, others afraid. I overheard one woman at the local diner say, "You know, Olivia's talking about forcing that old Marine off his property, says he's lowering property values." That was the moment I realized this wasn't about aesthetics, it was about control. I decided to pay a visit to the next HOA meeting. When I arrived, it was held in the newly built community clubhouse, marble floors, pretentious chandeliers, and about 20 residents sitting in neat rows like school children. Olivia stood at the podium running through violations and proposals for landscaping improvements. When it came time for public input, I raised my hand. She froze. Yes. Colonel, I'd like to address item number 6 on your list, I said. The so-called zoning inclusion of my property. This isn't the place for private disputes, she snapped. With all due respect, ma'am, when you send letters to my ranch, it becomes my business. Some of the residents started murmuring. I could see a few hiding their smiles. They knew this was ridiculous. Colonel, she said through gritted teeth, if you can't comply with our regulations, we'll have to enforce them legally. I nodded slowly. Good, because legality is something I happen to know well. I handed her a copy of my federal land deed, signed, sealed, and notarized 20 years ago. This ranch was purchased under the Veterans Land Grant Act. It's sovereign property, not subject to your subdivision's charter. I suggest you check the county records before mailing me another piece of paper. For a moment, she looked speechless. Then her expression hardened. You can wave your military papers all you want, Colonel, but around here, we follow HOA law. HOA law, I said. Never heard of it in the Constitution. The room broke into quiet laughter. Olivia's face turned red. She adjourned the meeting early. From that day on, I knew she'd come after me. Over the next week, drones buzzed above my property line. HOA inspection units, they called them. I caught 2 of their hired landscapers trying to measure my fence with a laser meter. They ran when my dog started barking. So I decided to turn the tables. I went down to the county records office myself. The clerk, a retired Navy guy, chuckled when I told him what was happening. She's been trying to expand HOA authority for months, he said. You're well outside her jurisdiction. She's bluffing. Then I'll call her bluff, I replied. I printed every document, maps, boundary charts, historical plats, and left them neatly in a folder labeled Legal Education for HOA Presidents. But before I could deliver it, Olivia made her next move. One morning, I found a bright orange envelope nailed to my front gate, in bold letters, Notice to Vacate. According to her, my ranch failed to comply with HOA bylaws and was subject to mandatory removal within 72 hours. I actually laughed out loud. Removal from my own land. But laughter can only last so long before principle kicks in. This woman had crossed the line from nuisance to harassment. That night, I sat on my porch watching the last light fade over the hills. My horses stood calm in the paddock. The wind carried that soft scent of hay and dust, the smell of freedom. And I made myself a quiet promise. If Olivia Adams wanted to play commander, she was about to learn what real command looked like. Because I might have been retired, but I never forgot how to lead an operation. The envelope's orange glare sat on my gate like a flare on a dark sea. Notice to Vacate, it barked, all caps, bold font, the kind of paper bullies love to hide behind. I stood there with the horses shifting in the morning light, the metal of the latch warm under my palm, and felt the same calm I used to feel right before a briefing. One breath in, one breath out, find the center, then move. I took the envelope into the kitchen, set it on the oak table I'd built with my own hands, and slid it open with the old kabar I keep by the fruit bowl. Inside were 6 pages, stapled crooked. The first page accused me of persistent non-compliance. The second cited a half-dozen bylaw codes, hedge height, structure, color, unauthorized signage, visible equipment. The third page claimed my property had been formally incorporated into Silver Creek's jurisdictional perimeter. The fourth set a deadline 72 hours to vacate. The fifth threatened daily fines escalating to lien. The sixth naturally carried Olivia's signature, a swooping flourish like a whip crack. I poured myself coffee and read every line twice. Then I flipped the stack over, grabbed a pen, and started annotating like I was grading homework. Incorrect boundary, no jurisdiction. Veterans Land Grant C deed, recorded 20 years prior to HOA charter. Attempted fraud, I wrote it all with tidy arrows and little boxes. It didn't make me angry, it made me focused. I've learned that rage is an unreliable engine. Resolve, on the other hand, will take you all the way home. At 10 a.m., a white SUV rolled up to my gate. Silver Creek compliance, the door red in gold vinyl. Out stepped a young man in a polo that fit like armor, and a woman with a tablet clutched like a shield. I walked down the gravel drive to meet them. The dog Daisy kept close to my leg. Morning, I said. Good morning, the woman said, crisp but nervous. I'm with compliance. We're here to confirm service of notice. You've confirmed it, I said, tapping the paper. And I'm confirming receipt. You can also confirm you're trespassing if you step past that post. The young man shifted. Sir, the HOA has authority to. No, I said, polite and steady. It doesn't. It has a fantasy. You two are not the enemy, but you're playing dress up on a field you don't own. They exchanged a look. The woman swallowed. The president instructed us to photograph the violations. Knock yourselves out, I said, from the public right-of-way. Cross that line and Daisy will announce you, and then I will. After that, the sheriff will do it in writing. They took their photos from the roadside and left in a hurry, tires gritting like teeth. I went back to the kitchen, pulled my comedy material folder, added the new notice, and then opened the fireproof safe. Out came the deed packet, the grant, the survey, the legal description, the map overlays I'd prepared. I laid them all out like a general's sand table. Then I made 3 copies, one for the sheriff, one for the county clerk, one for myself, and another folder labeled, "For anyone who thinks paper makes them king." By noon, my phone pinged. A neighbor, Sam, texted, "They're posting your eviction on the HOA app. Olivia's calling a special meeting tonight. Says you're defiant." Defiant. I smiled. There are worse words to be called by people who worship identical mailboxes. At 2, another car arrived, this one black with a discreet light bar behind the windshield. 2 officers stepped out, hands loose, posture relaxed. I recognized one Deputy Morales. We'd talked at the fall barbecue about trout and grandkids. After noon, Colonel Morales said, tipping his cap, "We received a call from a Miss Adams claiming there's a trespasser on HOA land." I told the dispatcher it sounded off, but policy says we check. "Of course," I said. "Come on up." Coffee. They declined the coffee, but took the shade of my porch. Daisy adopted Morales like a lost cousin. I set the deed packet on the table between us. Short version, I said, I bought this land 20 years ago, under the Veterans Land Grant. The HOA established their charter 15 years ago. They've never had jurisdiction here. Olivia's trying to expand her sandbox with paperwork and audacity. Morales skimmed the documents. The other deputy, a young woman with clear eyes and a no-nonsense bun, read the legal descriptions carefully. "Looks cut and dried to me," she said. "This parcel's well outside their boundary. Even their influence plan is advisory only." "Exactly," I said. "But they've escalated to a notice to vacate, and they're sending compliance teams to my fence line. I'm not asking for anything except peace. But if peace is refused, I expect the law." Morales nodded. "You'll have it. We'll file an incident report, attempted civil harassment, improper use of authority. If they set foot past your line, call us." "Appreciate you," I said. They left with a copy of the packet. I watched their taillights disappear and felt that familiar pre-storm stillness settle across the property. The afternoon stretched thin and bright. Somewhere in the distance, a hammer ticked someone building a pergola that matched their neighbor's pergola that matched their HOA's personality. At 5:30, I saddled my old mare Ginger and rode the north fence, the long spine of the property that runs parallel to the subdivision's backlots. Lawns lay beyond the wire like green rugs, rolled to the horizon, perfect edges, no dandelions, not a single toy left out of place. It looked safe and joyless in equal measure. A drone buzzed above the cul-de-sac. It dipped low-nosy, then zipped back when I looked straight at it. Ginger flicked her ear as if to say, "Flies all of them." By 7, the clubhouse parking lot filled. I could see the glow from the hilltop. "A special meeting," Sam had said. Curious, I showered, put on a clean denim shirt, and drove down. I parked outside the HOA line. Symbolic, sure, but symbols matter, and walked in with my deed packet under one arm. Inside, the air conditioning carried the faint citrus scent of money. Residents lined up in neat rows, phones ready. Olivia stood at the podium in a sharp blazer chin lifted like a ship's prow. Her eyes found me and glittered. "Perfect timing," she said into the microphone. "The individual in question has decided to join us." "I'm a neighbor," I said calmly, "not a subject." She ignored the comment. "Order of business due to repeated and willful violations of community standards, and in accordance with Section 4.3 of our bylaws, we have issued a notice to vacate to the occupant of the non-compliant property on Ridgeline Road. This measure protects our property values and safety. We have engaged legal counsel and requested police assistance." A murmur ran through the crowd. Someone whispered, "Is that even legal?" Another answered, "If Olivia says so." I stepped to the side aisle and raised the folder. "May I address the board?" Olivia's smile was porcelain. 2 minutes. I took the center aisle, not too fast, not theatrical, and stood where everyone could see my face. "My name is Jack Turner," I said, voice steady. "I spent 40 years in the Marine Corps. I purchased my ranch under a federal veterans grant recorded at the county 2 decades ago. Silver Creek HOA did not exist then. Your charter does not cover my land. Your influence area is a brochure, not a law. Here are copies of my deed survey and boundary maps for your records. I will happily email them." A few people nodded relief, flickering on their faces like porch lights. Others stared at Olivia. She took the papers without looking down. Our legal counsel has confirmed jurisdiction. Name the counsel, I said, and show the opinion. Olivia's jaw tightened. We don't share privileged documents with non-members. Then stop sending non-privileged threats to non-members, I said, keeping it light, almost friendly. This notice is void on its face. You know it. The deputies who visited me today know it. Your own bylaws know it if you read them. A chuckle rippled. Olivia's cheeks flared. She leaned into the mic. Sir, if you refuse to comply, we will escalate. We can place a lien. We can involve the county. You can try, I said. You cannot lien what you do not govern. As for the county, I talked to the clerk this morning, and the sheriff. And because I like things tidy, I also submitted a harassment complaint and a request for a declaratory judgment. That was before your compliance team trespassed to nail this circus poster on my gate. I lifted the orange notice. Cameras clicked like cicadas after rain. A man in the second row stood. Olivia, is this true? We're going after a veterans ranch that isn't even in Silver Creek. We are protecting our investments, Olivia hissed. Rustic eyesores reduce value. Rustic eyesores built this county, I said gently, and veterans bought you the right to decorate your mailbox. Laughter now louder, uncontrolled. Olivia banged the gavel. Order, order. She pointed the gavel at me like a wand. You have 24 hours to remove unauthorized signage, repaint all visible structures, white lower fencing to code, and submit for approval. Or leave. No, I said simply. Silence fell like a curtain. I'll leave you with this, I added. Tomorrow morning, I'll be conducting a lawful, pre-approved activity in the vicinity of Silver Creek. It will be orderly, respectful, and fully coordinated with local authorities. It will not involve your property unless you invite it. I suggest you take the night to reread your bylaws and reconsider whether you want to keep trespassing across a line you can't see, but the law can. Someone in the back said, What activity? Another whispered. Is it construction? Olivia squinted at me, trying to read the map of my face. Meeting adjourned, she snapped. I walked out under a sky so clear it looked newly minted. Crickets tuned up in the ditches. The clubhouse doors swung shut behind me with a soft hydraulic sigh. Outside, Sam caught up to me. Colonel, he said, eyes bright, you really going to do something? Something lawful, I said. Something clarifying. He grinned. I'll have my camera ready. Back at the ranch, I dialed 3 numbers. Morales at the sheriff's office, the county clerk, and then a number I hadn't called in years, a desk at the base logistics office. The voice on the other end heard my name and gave a low whistle. Colonel Turner. Been a while. Yes, it has, I said. I've got a training coordination document you might dust off. Community relations component. We'll keep it clean, safe, and by the book. Can you spare some bodies for a morning drill? A beat. Then a chuckle. How many you thinking, sir? I looked out across my pasture to the neat grid of houses beyond those rows of cloned facades that believed conformity was the same thing as community. Oh, I said, smiling to myself. Enough to make the point. I hung up, turned off the porch light, and listened to the wind move through the pines, the old patient sound of a place that remembers who truly tends it. Somewhere in the subdivision a drone buzzed, and then fell quiet. I slept the way I haven't slept in days. When dawn came, it came fast, a clean blade of light across the ridge, and with it, engines, many engines, voices, cadence, set to a heartbeat I knew by muscle memory. I poured coffee into a thermos, tucked the deed packet under my arm for habit's sake, and stepped onto the porch with Daisy at my heel. The day of clarification had arrived. By the time the first golden light spilled across the valley, I'd already been up for hours. Old habits die hard. Coffee checklist, silence. The house was still, but the air outside hummed with that low electric tension that always comes before something big, before a mission, a verdict, a reckoning. I stood on my porch watching the mist creep through the pines. The horses shifted in their stalls, restless but calm, like they could sense what was coming. Out past the ridge, the roofs of Silver Creek glimmered in perfect symmetry, that artificial perfection that always made me feel like I was staring at a movie set instead of a neighborhood. Inside my desk looked like a command post. Deeds maps a folder labeled HOA incident log. Another one marked media contacts. I wasn't planning an ambush. I was preparing documentation and demonstration. Everything above board, every move by the book. Still, I couldn't help but feel the familiar rhythm of an operation coming together. That pulse in my chest. The click of strategy sliding into place. After the fiasco at the clubhouse last night, I knew Olivia wouldn't back down. She didn't know how. People like her mistake embarrassment for challenge. And the viral clips, oh, they'd started already. Someone at the meeting had uploaded her meltdown, her 24-hour ultimatum. By midnight, the video was on 3 veteran Facebook groups and 1 local news forum under the title, HOA President Threatens War, Hero Over Fence Paint. The comments section was brutal. She's about to learn what Semper Fi means. Someone needs to teach Karen about federal land grants. Colonel's about to deploy the neighborhood. And my personal favorite, she picked the wrong hill to die on. By dawn, my inbox had messages from journalists, retired Marines, even a congressman's aide who said, "If she touches that flag, call me." I didn't need backup, but I wasn't going to turn down support either. Around 7 a.m., I heard a truck pull into the driveway. It was Jake Bulldog Rains, an old comrade from my command days. He stepped out wearing sunglasses, a faded base cap, and that same grin he used to wear before training drills that made recruits question their life choices. "Colonel," he said, giving me a nod, "heard you've got a situation. More like a misunderstanding with delusions of authority," I replied. He grinned. Well, we brought clarity. 2 more trucks pulled in behind him, familiar faces climbing out, veterans reserve members, logistics guys. They weren't here for violence or intimidation, they were here for structure. The base had approved a community relations drill for the day, a logistics exercise involving convoy coordination and rural navigation. Completely legal, fully registered, and entirely coincidental that it would take place adjacent to Silver Creek's perfectly manicured lanes. I sipped my coffee, everything set, paperwork filed. Sheriff's office notified. Base commander signed off. We even have permits for crowd management, in case your HOA audience gets enthusiastic. Excellent. By 8 a.m., the quiet ranch lane started filling with movement. Diesel engines rumbled. Boots hit gravel. Radios crackled. The air filled with that disciplined hum only a Marine operation could produce, efficient, loud, without chaos, purposeful, without aggression. Daisy wagged her tail like she'd been waiting for this parade all week. From the ridge above the subdivision, you could already see the glint of sun bouncing off dozens of trucks, olive, sand, black. It wasn't 300 soldiers armed for war. It was 300 Marines on rotation for logistics, training drivers, engineers, communications, techs, men and women who'd volunteered for a weekend exercise in civil coordination. I called Morales at the sheriff's office just to keep everything transparent. "Morning, Colonel," he said, his tone cautious but amused. "I've got about 50 calls already asking why there are military vehicles outside Silver Creek. Because I said we're training to coordinate rural safety routes entirely within public right-of-way. You have the approval forms, right?" "I do," he said, chuckling. "And Olivia just called me screaming about an invasion." I told her to calm down, said it's a federal training day. Her words were, and I quote, "They're surrounding my house." Technically, I said that's accurate. I could almost hear his grin through the phone. "Just keep it civil, Colonel." "I know you will, but I have to say it. You know me, Morales. I'm all about diplomacy." By 8:30, the subdivision's silence was gone. Rows of identical driveways framed a scene out of a military movie, transport trucks rolling slowly, Marines stepping out to set up temporary barricades, navigation posts, and comms tents. A loudspeaker crackled, "Training exercise in progress. Please remain clear of the roadways." Olivia burst out of her front door like a peacock in panic. She was dressed in full HOA battle attire, pressed blazer, pearls, tablet clutched tight. Her voice sliced through the morning air. "What is this?" she screamed. "You can't just bring tanks into my neighborhood. Those are Humvees, ma'am," Jake said politely. "And we have authorization." "From Howe County Sheriff's State Guard and Marine Command," I said, stepping forward with a coffee mug in hand. "Would you like to see the paperwork again?" I brought extra copies. Her jaw worked, but no sound came out. She looked around. A few neighbors were already outside, phones raised, filming everything. Kids on bicycles waved at the Marines, who waved back cheerfully. The whole scene looked more like a parade than a standoff. "Training Zone," one of the corporals announced, posting a laminated sign on the HOA entrance. "Restricted area for safety. Please stay indoors." Olivia shrieked, "You can't restrict me from my own street." "Technically, ma'am," Jake said with a smile, "we're restricting vehicles from obstructing federal movement for 4 hours. You're free to walk wherever you like." She froze, realizing walking meant facing dozens of cameras. The irony was delicious. By mid-morning, the Marines were efficiently cleaning ditches, trimming overgrown hedges, and patching potholes the HOA had ignored for years. They even repainted a few fading stop lines at intersections. The neighborhood looked better than it ever had, and Olivia's voice could be heard echoing from porch to porch. "This is unauthorized landscaping." I stood by my fence, watching the entire spectacle unfold with that quiet satisfaction you only feel when justice aligns with poetic timing. Then came the cherry on top, a drone crew from a local news channel. Apparently someone had tipped them off about a neighborhood under military lockdown. The camera zoomed in on Olivia, pacing frantically in front of her home, shouting orders no one followed. The anchor's voiceover, local HOA conflict, escalates as retired Marine hosts training exercise outside disputed property. They cut to me for comment. "Sir, are you retaliating against the HOA?" I smiled at the camera. Retaliation implies anger. This is just coordination, showing that community works best when people know their boundaries. The clip aired live on social media. Within hours, hashtags appeared, number Hokarens Marines, number Operation Curb Appeal, number Semperfence. By noon, the internet had already crowned a winner. But the real beauty wasn't in the memes, it was in the discipline. Every Marine there followed orders, respected property lines, and treated residents kindly. Kids took photos. Families came out with bottled water. It became a spontaneous celebration, unity wrapped in irony. All except for one house, Olivia's. She'd barricaded herself inside curtains, drawn posting angry messages on the HOA page. "This is a hostile occupation." I couldn't resist replying once. Technically, it's a beautification effort. The post went viral instantly. Around 1 p.m., Morales drove by in his cruiser. He stepped out laughing as he took in the scene. "Colonel, I've seen a lot of neighborhood disputes, but this is a first. You've got better PR than half the county." "I didn't plan for PR," I said. "I planned for perspective." He tipped his hat. "Well, you've got that in spades. Olivia's been calling the mayor, the governor, even the base. Everyone told her the same thing: legal, coordinated public service." I looked toward her house blinds, twitching like nervous eyelids. Sometimes I said quietly, "You don't need to fight people like her. You just need to show them what real order looks like." As the afternoon sun climbed higher, the Marines wrapped up the operation loading gear, thanking residents. The streets looked spotless, the lawns trimmed. The entrance sign, Silver Creek Estates, gleamed freshly painted, thanks to one enthusiastic corporal who decided to fix the eyesore. When the convoy engines finally quieted and the dust settled, the silence that followed was pure and heavy. The HOA had been humbled not by violence, but by competence. I took one last look at the neighborhood before heading back to my porch. Somewhere behind me, Olivia's voice cracked through the still air. "This isn't over." I smiled, watching the horizon glow orange. "You're right," I whispered to myself. "It's only halftime." The next morning arrived with the kind of stillness that only happens after a storm, the kind of silence that hums with leftover energy, like the land itself is holding its breath. The Marines had cleared out at sunset the day before leaving behind, perfectly repaired curbs, clean ditches, and an HOA that looked more polished than it ever had. But for Olivia, it wasn't peace. It was humiliation. The moment I stepped onto my porch with my coffee, I saw her standing at the far end of the road phone, in one hand, clipboard in the other, hair tied so tight it looked painful. Even from 200 yards away, I could tell she hadn't slept. Her posture screamed tension, outrage, and maybe just a pinch of disbelief that her power had evaporated overnight. She was talking rapidly into her phone, pacing in sharp, angry lines. I could almost hear the tone clipped, defensive, desperate. I leaned against the porch post and smiled. The air smelled of hay and diesel, a reminder of the controlled chaos that had swept through Silver Creek just hours earlier. "Morning, Daisy," I said, scratching the old shepherd's ears. "Reckon our neighbor's planning her next counterattack." The dog huffed, unimpressed. About an hour later, my phone buzzed. It was Morales from the sheriff's office. "Colonel," he said, voice half amused, half weary, "you might want to stay close to your property today. We just got a call from Miss Adams again." "What's the complaint this time?" "She says the Marines destroyed her sense of community and violated HOA sovereignty." I chuckled. Didn't know HOAs had sovereignty. Apparently they do now. "She's trying to file a restraining order against the U.S. Marine Corps." That made me laugh so hard I nearly spilled my coffee. "Let me know how the judge reacts to that one." "Will do," he said. "And Colonel, I gotta say, that drill of yours, genius. Half the county's talking about it." "Appreciate it, Morales," I said. "But we're not done yet. She's going to dig herself deeper before she realizes what hole she's standing in." He paused. "You sound like a man with a plan." I didn't answer, just smiled to myself. By mid-morning, I heard the familiar rumble of engines again, this time smaller vehicles, county trucks, not military. Turns out the Marines had done more than run a drill. They'd triggered a whole series of civic inspections. The county had noticed the HOA's lack of road maintenance, missing safety signs, and improper drainage management. A trio of officials in reflective vests showed up at Olivia's house with clipboards and cameras. From my porch, I could see her storming toward them like a bull in heels. "You can't just inspect private property without authorization," she shouted. The lead inspector pointed to his badge. "County Safety Review, ma'am. Your HOA falls under district jurisdiction for shared infrastructure. You might want to check your bylaws." Her face turned crimson. She tried to argue, but the officials ignored her and began documenting violations. Ironically, they cited her own house for several unpermitted modifications, a blocked drainage path, and a decorative gate that extended 6 inches into the public easement. I almost felt bad for her, almost. As they snapped photos, one of the workers walked over to me. "You're Colonel Turner, right, Heard? You had a run-in with the HOA." I nodded. "Well," he said, grinning, "thanks for the heads up. We've been waiting for a reason to audit this place. They've been filing false maintenance reports for years." "Happy to help," I said. The rest of the morning was a comedy of bureaucracy. County workers measured, photographed, and marked several spots with orange flags. Olivia followed them like a furious shadow, scribbling on her clipboard, demanding answers no one cared to give. Around noon, a convoy of news vans pulled into the subdivision. Word had spread again: HOA president faces county investigation after military drill. A young reporter approached my gate, microphone in hand. "Colonel Turner, could we ask for a comment about yesterday's events?" "Sure," I said, leaning casually against the fence. "Did you plan the Marine operation as a form of retaliation?" "Retaliation," I repeated. "No, ma'am. That was a lawful training exercise. But I suppose if a little civic pride feels like punishment to someone that says more about them than about me," she grinned. "So you're saying the HOA brought this upon themselves?" "I'm saying," I replied, "that when you start policing your neighbor's paint colors, you might want to make sure your own house isn't sitting on a cracked foundation." That line made the evening news headline. Meanwhile, Olivia's meltdown continued. She stood in her driveway, screaming at the county workers, waving her phone like a sword. "You're all in on this. This is collusion. You're conspiring with him," she shouted, pointing at me across the street. The workers didn't even look up. Her outburst drew a crowd, residents gathering at the corners, whispering, filming. Some laughed quietly. Others just looked relieved that someone was finally standing up to her. One older woman leaned over to her husband and whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear, "I told you Karma had a sense of humor." By 2 p.m., the situation had become too good to ignore. I saddled Ginger and rode slowly down the road, tipping my hat at neighbors as I passed. The reporters followed me with their cameras, curious. When I reached Olivia's driveway, she froze mid-tirade. "Afternoon, Miss Adams," I said, voice calm as ever. "Get off this street," she yelled. "You don't belong here," I pointed to the county inspector beside her. "He seems to think I do. And legally speaking, so does every boundary map filed since 2004. The inspector cleared his throat, clearly trying not to laugh. "Ma'am, you really need to let us finish. You're currently obstructing a county audit." "Obstructing? This is my neighborhood." "Not according to Section 12 of your own charter," he replied dryly. "This area is classified as shared jurisdiction, meaning the county can inspect at will." That hit her like a slap. She stammered something unintelligible and stomped back into her house. The door slammed so hard it rattled the windows. The inspector turned to me. "Thank you for your patience, Colonel. We'll send her the report within the week." "Take your time," I said. "I don't think she's in the mood for reading today." When the trucks finally left the street, looked oddly peaceful again. The residents started chatting among themselves, some even crossing over to shake my hand. A man named Greg, one of the quieter homeowners, said, "Colonel, I just wanted to thank you. You did what the rest of us were too scared to do." "Just stood my ground," I said. "Yeah, but you did it with style," he said, smiling. "Olivia's been terrorizing this neighborhood for years. Maybe now people will realize she's not invincible." That night I sat on my porch with Daisy curled at my feet, watching the stars slide over the horizon. The phone buzzed again, another message from Morales. He sent a single line. "County found falsified records. HOA's in deep trouble." "Thought you'd enjoy that," I grinned. "Copy that." Then I looked out across the dark fields toward the distant glow of Silver Creek. The place looked peaceful now, but I knew better. Peace isn't the absence of noise. It's the result of someone standing firm long enough for the noise to die out. I took a slow sip of coffee and whispered to no one in particular. Lesson number 1. Olivia, never start a war with a man who already knows how to finish it. A light flickered in her window, then went dark. Maybe she heard me, maybe not. But one thing was certain: the next day would not be kind to her. Because when you play games with paperwork, the law eventually plays back. The morning after the county inspection felt oddly quiet, too quiet for a neighborhood that had just hosted a full-blown government audit. The air was thick with that kind of silence that doesn't mean peace but tension. The kind of silence that happens when gossip hasn't yet finished loading. I woke up early, as usual, coffee in hand, Daisy trotting at my heel. The ranch looked peaceful, bathed in golden light birds skimming over the pasture like they hadn't heard the drama. But even from my porch, I could tell something was brewing down in Silver Creek. Cars were parked crooked along the main road, and a small crowd was gathering outside Olivia's house. I couldn't resist. Curiosity might have killed the cat, but in this case it was just going to make my morning coffee more entertaining. When I reached the property line, I could already hear her voice shrill, commanding unraveling. Olivia Adams was in full meltdown mode. Her pink blazer was rumpled hair, disheveled, and she was clutching her clipboard like a lifebuoy. A few of the HOA board members stood around her, looking guilty and uncomfortable, trying to calm her down. "This is harassment," she screamed, waving a stack of papers in the air. "The county has no authority here. I am the authority here." Her vice president, a nervous man named Harold, tried to reason with her. "Olivia, maybe we should let the auditors finish their review." "Finish. They've ruined everything," she snapped, cutting him off. "Do you know what it looks like when the media reports that the HOA president's house violated her own rules? I look like a joke. A fraud," Harold muttered under his breath. "Well, if the shoe fits," she whirled on him so fast that her clipboard nearly flew out of her hand. "What did you say?" He stepped back. "Nothing, Olivia. Just, maybe we should take a break." But there was no stopping her now. The news vans had returned for follow-up coverage, their cameras gleaming in the sunlight. Reporters hovered at a distance, recording every word. It was like watching a live broadcast of self-destruction. Olivia turned toward them, her voice rising another octave. "You people think you can humiliate me on TV," she shouted. "This entire situation has been orchestrated. That man," she pointed a trembling finger toward my ranch, "has manipulated the media, the military, and the county government to destroy my reputation." I raised my coffee cup from my porch and gave a small polite wave. She saw it, and that was the spark that lit the powder keg. "Oh, don't you wave at me, Colonel," she shrieked. "You think this is funny. You think your little Marine parade makes you untouchable." Her voice cracked. "Well, guess what? I'm filing for criminal charges. You and your goons trespassed on HOA property, you brought military equipment into a residential area, you've endangered civilians, and she jabbed her clipboard toward me, am going to make sure you regret it." The crowd gasped, but I didn't move. I just set my mug down on the porch rail, walked down the steps, and approached her, slowly, calm, measured, deliberate. The cameras followed me like sharks sensing blood. When I reached the edge of her driveway, I stopped. "Miss Adams," I said quietly, "you may want to lower your voice before you say something you can't unsay on live television." "Don't you threaten me," she snapped. "Not a threat," I said evenly. "A suggestion. You're free to call whoever you want, sheriff, lawyers, the president, if you can reach him. But you'll find every single one of them saying the same thing: no law was broken. Everything that happened here was authorized and documented. You're standing in front of half the town trying to fight facts with feelings." That made her falter, but only for a second. Then she laughed a high, hysterical laugh that didn't sound human anymore. "Oh, you think you're clever, don't you? You think everyone loves you because you're a hero." I shrugged. "I think they love me because I leave them alone." The crowd chuckled quietly. Olivia's face flushed red. "You're mocking me. I'm just speaking plain English," I said. She turned on the reporters next. "And you're parasites, all of you twisting the truth to make me look insane." One of the reporters, the same young woman who'd interviewed me before, held her ground. "Miss Adams, we're just documenting events as they happen. Would you like to make an official statement?" Olivia froze, realizing the cameras were all on her. For a moment, she straightened her blazer, trying to recover some dignity. "Fine. Yes. My statement is this: the HOA is the backbone of civilized living. Without structure, without order, neighborhoods decay. We maintain standards, and we..." Then, as if on cue, her sprinkler system burst to life, except it wasn't spraying water. It was sputtering brown, muddy sludge straight onto her heels and blazer. The crowd exploded in laughter. Olivia shrieked, stumbling backward. "Turn it off, turn it off." Harold tried, but the control box sparked and shorted. One of the Marines from yesterday, still nearby, helping an elderly resident with yard repairs, called out helpfully, "Ma'am, looks like your irrigation line's clogged." Probably a result of all those unapproved gate extensions blocking drainage flow. That comment made it onto every news clip that night. By the time the sprinklers finally sputtered out, Olivia was covered head to toe in muddy streaks. Her hair hung limp, her clipboard dripping brown water. She glared at the crowd like a wounded lion. "You'll all regret this," she hissed. "I built this community from somewhere in the back," someone shouted. "Yeah, and now you're flooding it." The laughter this time was louder, uncontrollable, joyous, cathartic. She stormed back toward her house, but before she reached the door, she slipped on the wet sidewalk and fell with a loud thud, her clipboard flying into a puddle. The cameras caught every second of it, slow motion, dramatic, poetic justice in 4K. I walked forward and offered her a hand, but she slapped it away. "Don't touch me, as you wish," I said, stepping back. She scrambled to her feet and pointed a shaking finger at me again. "This isn't over. I'm calling my lawyer, the mayor, the governor." "Good idea," I said calmly. "You might want to start with a plumber." That line did it. The crowd burst into applause. Even Harold, her right-hand man, couldn't hide his grin. He turned to her and said softly, "Olivia, maybe it's time to step back." "Step back," she shouted. "You're all traitors, or just tired," he said, voice low. "We're tired of you turning everything into a war." For the first time, she had no comeback. She just stood there, soaked and trembling as realization crept in. The HOA members she had bullied for years were no longer afraid. The reporters packed up their gear, neighbors began to drift away, and the once feared Olivia Adams stood alone in front of her dripping house, a queen without a court. I gave her one last look. "For what it's worth," I said, "you could have been a decent neighbor. You just had to learn that power doesn't mean control." Then I turned and walked back toward my ranch. Daisy padding beside me, the sound of laughter and camera shutters fading behind. Later that afternoon, Morales called. His tone was part amusement, part disbelief. "Colonel, you're going viral again. The clip of her yelling about HOA sovereignty has 500,000 views already. Guess people enjoy a good civics lesson," I said. He chuckled. "You may not realize it, but you've just become a local legend. Folks are calling you the Colonel of Calm." I smiled. Better than the man who got evicted by a clipboard. That night, as the sun dipped below the ridge, the quiet returned, this time the good kind. The air smelled like cut grass and clean dirt. The world, for the first time in weeks, felt right again. And somewhere across the valley, a woman in a pink blazer sat alone in her living room, realizing that her crown had finally cracked. By the following morning, Silver Creek wasn't a neighborhood anymore, it was a headline. Every local station, talk radio host, and suburban Facebook group within 100 miles was dissecting the HOA meltdown heard round the county. Clips of Olivia's muddy sprinkler moment looped endlessly online, accompanied by slow-motion replays, remixes, and one particularly cruel TikTok edit that set her fall to dramatic opera music. I didn't post a thing, but the internet didn't care. Someone had already made a meme of me standing calmly with my coffee cup, captioned, "When Karen declares sovereignty, but you've got the deed." By 8 a.m., I'd received 300 emails, some from strangers thanking me for standing up for every bullied homeowner, others from veterans saying they hadn't laughed that hard in years. My favorite was from a high school civics teacher who wrote, "Thank you for the perfect real-world example of overreach and lawful resistance." Showing this in class today. For once, the news cycle worked in favor of common sense, but not for Olivia. At 9 a.m., Morales called again, his voice half amused, half exhausted. "Colonel, she's been to the station 3 times this morning, first to file harassment, then to withdraw it, then to demand we arrest the internet." "Ambitious," I said. "She's threatening to sue the county, the Marines, the news station, and possibly you for psychological sabotage." Our clerk can't stop laughing. "I'd tell her to take a number," I replied, "but she'd probably try to regulate the line." Still, I felt a twinge of sympathy. Public humiliation is a powerful solvent. It strips away ego faster than acid. But sympathy doesn't erase consequence. Around noon, a black sedan pulled into her driveway. 2 county officials stepped out, briefcases in hand. Word spread quickly through the neighborhood the audit board had arrived. Apparently, the county's financial office had taken interest in Silver Creek's discrepancies. Years of inflated maintenance fees, missing receipts, and suspicious consulting costs had finally caught up. I didn't need binoculars to see the scene unfold. Olivia came to the door, makeup caked on like armor, and tried her usual smile. The men didn't smile back. They handed her a stack of documents, then stepped aside as another car, a sheriff's cruiser, pulled up behind them. Morales climbed out, nodded at me across the road, then joined the officials on her porch. Whatever they said, it made her knees buckle. She shouted something about political witch hunts before slamming the door. Half an hour later, the officers exited carrying boxes, files, binders, maybe even that infamous clipboard. The crowd of residents that had gathered began whispering excitedly. One woman clapped once, then stopped embarrassed. By mid-afternoon, the rumor mill had already produced the story. Olivia had been formally removed as HOA president, pending investigation for mismanagement of community funds. Harold, the timid vice president, looked like a man who'd just been released from a long captivity. He approached me that evening, hat in hand. "Colonel Turner," he said, voice low, "I wanted to apologize. For all of it." Olivia had us convinced you were trying to undermine the community. I nodded. And now he gave a small, sheepish smile. Now I think she was the one undermining it. We're holding an emergency board meeting tonight to vote on new leadership. I'd be honored if you attended. I shook my head. Appreciate it, Harold, but I've got no interest in running anyone's neighborhood. I just like mine quiet. He chuckled. Fair enough. Still, thanks for reminding us that authority's supposed to serve, not rule. That night, Silver Creek held its most crowded meeting ever. I stayed back, sitting on my tailgate across the street with Daisy and a thermos of coffee, watching neighbors file and people who had avoided those gatherings for years now walking in with their heads high. Through the windows, I could see hands raised, papers signed, and eventually applause. Later, Harold walked out and gave me a thumbs up. Unanimous vote, he called. She's out. Permanently. Good, I said. Maybe now you'll all get some sleep. He hesitated. Colonel, one more thing. The board wants to reimburse you for the trouble. Maybe cover your legal fees. I laughed. Harold, if I accepted money every time I fought a bully, I'd own half the state. Donate it to a veterans charity instead. His grin widened. Will do. The following week brought more fallout. The state attorney's office opened an inquiry into HOA overreach after our story hit national news. Reporters dug into other associations run by Olivia in neighboring counties and found similar financial irregularities. She vanished from Silver Creek overnight. No forwarding address, no farewell post, just an empty house with a for-sale bank-owned sign staked in the yard 2 months later. Meanwhile, the mood in the neighborhood shifted. The fences stayed mismatched, the lawns varied in color, and for the first time that was fine. Kids rode bikes without being scolded for tire tracks. Someone painted their mailbox bright blue. Instead of citations, they got compliments. One evening, the new HOA board, led by a soft-spoken woman named Ruth, invited me to their first official community barbecue. Just good food and no rules, she said. I went mostly out of curiosity. The crowd was friendly, laughter, genuine. For the first time, I saw Silver Creek as it could have been all along, a place where people cared more about being neighbors than being enforcers. Ruth clinked her glass and made a small speech. We owe Colonel Turner a thank you, she said, not just for standing up to Olivia, but for showing us that community doesn't come from regulations, it comes from respect. They applauded. I raised my cup but didn't say much. I've never liked speeches, especially when the message already landed. After the event, Morales found me by the grill. You know, he said, the mayor called me this morning. Wants to give you a Civic Responsibility Award. You'll probably have to wear a tie. I groaned. Tell him I'm allergic to ceremony. He laughed. You've become a symbol, Colonel. The man who reminded the HOA world that lines on paper don't make someone a ruler. I didn't remind them, I said quietly. They reminded themselves when they finally looked up from the paperwork. Before he left, Morales added, oh, and about those Marines Command's planning to name next year's community drill Operation Silver Creek. Thought you'd like to know. I shook my head, smiling. Tell them to make it quieter next time. The weeks that followed were blissfully uneventful. No letters, no drones, no pink blazers pacing my fence line. Just sunsets, open fields, and the creak of the windmill. But peace doesn't mean the story ended. The media kept circling back, hungry for updates. They wanted a follow-up segment titled, The Man Who Defeated the HOA. I declined every invitation. I wasn't interested in fame. I'd already served my time in the spotlight. Still, there was one interview I agreed to, a podcast run by veterans about life after service. Colonel, the host, asked, what lesson did this whole HOA thing teach you? I thought for a moment. That some battles aren't fought with bullets or fists, they're fought with patience and paper. And that the hardest part of peace is maintaining it when someone keeps trying to take it from you. He nodded. And the Marines, what'd they think? I smiled. They thought it was the funniest field exercise they ever ran. When the episode aired, it closed with my favorite line from that conversation: never confuse authority with wisdom. A loud voice and a clipboard don't make you right. Months passed and Silver Creek slowly faded from headlines. But every so often I'd get a postcard from some distant stranger homeowners in Arizona, Florida, Texas, all saying the same thing. Thanks for showing us how to stand our ground. I'd tack them on the wall of my workshop, right above the old Marine Corps flag. A quiet reminder that sometimes doing the right thing makes more noise than you intend. As for Olivia, rumor had it, she tried to start another HOA in a different county. It lasted 3 weeks before the residents voted to dissolve it entirely. I guess word travels fast when the cautionary tale comes with viral footage. And me, I went back to my life, mending fences, riding Ginger along the ridge, drinking my morning coffee in peace. The best kind of victory I've learned is the one that lets you forget there was ever a fight. A few weeks after the dust settled, I realized how much quieter life had become not just at my ranch but in Silver Creek itself. The soundscape that once buzzed with HOA patrol cars, lawnmowers cut to regulation height, and Olivia's shrill commands over her walkie-talkie was gone. In its place was something better: laughter. Every evening I could hear it drift across the hills, kids playing catch on driveways, neighbors chatting over fences, the occasional splash from someone's new backyard pool. It was the sound of normal people remembering that freedom and friendship don't require permission slips. I spent those mornings tending to my land like I always had. The fences got a fresh coat of paint not because someone ordered it, but because I wanted to. My horses grazed contentedly. The windmill creaked in rhythm with the breeze. Daisy dozed under the porch. Peace had returned. But more than that, perspective had returned. A few times I caught myself thinking about Olivia, not out of spite, but curiosity. What happens to someone when the thing they built their entire identity around collapses? What do you do when you've spent years enforcing control, and one morning you wake up and realize you've lost it all? The answer came one Friday afternoon, when a dusty silver sedan rolled up my driveway. Out stepped Harold, the former HOA vice president, holding a small envelope. "Colonel," he greeted me, smiling awkwardly. "You got a minute?" "Always do," I said, motioning toward the porch. He sat down, the boards creaking beneath him. "It's about Olivia. Thought you should know she's officially out of Silver Creek, moved upstate. Word is she's living with her sister. No job, no HOA, no clipboard." I raised an eyebrow. "And the investigation closed. They found misuse of funds, but since she cooperated at the end and returned what she could, they let her off with restitution and a fine. She's lucky, honestly." I sipped my coffee, thinking it over. "Maybe she'll find some peace, too." Harold chuckled softly. "You're a better man than me. If she'd done to me what she did to you, I'd still be mad." I was mad, I admitted. Then I remembered something we used to say in the Corps: don't let an amateur take you off mission. She wasn't the enemy, Harold. She was the distraction. He nodded, staring out toward the open fields. "You ever think she'll change?" I smiled faintly. "Maybe. But some people don't change, they just run out of audience." He laughed quietly, then handed me the envelope. "The board wanted you to have this." Inside was a photograph. The entire Silver Creek community, families, kids, even the new HOA leadership, standing together under a banner that read, "Thank you, Colonel Turner. Our community, our choice." Below it, a handwritten note from Ruth, the new president. "You reminded us that a neighborhood is supposed to be a home, not a hierarchy." I didn't say anything for a long time, just stared at the photo and felt something I hadn't in a while, a quiet pride, the kind that doesn't need applause. Harold stood up to leave. "Barbecue tomorrow evening at the clubhouse. Hope you'll come." I nodded, wouldn't miss it. The next day was one of those perfect country afternoons, sunlight slanting through the trees, a gentle wind carrying the smell of grilled food and laughter. I rode Ginger down to Silver Creek, and for the first time since I'd met Olivia, nobody glared, whispered, or measured my fence posts. Kids ran up to pet the horse, neighbors waved. Someone handed me a plate piled high with ribs and corn on the cob. It felt human again. Ruth spotted me near the grill and raised her glass. "To the man who reminded us that freedom and order can coexist," everyone cheered, and I raised my cup back, smiling. "Appreciate the sentiment," I said, "but all I did was stand my ground. You all did the rebuilding." "That's the point," Ruth replied. "You showed us how." The evening rolled on with laughter, stories, and music. At one point, a local band played a tongue-in-cheek song called Semper Fence, and the crowd roared with laughter. Even Morales showed up, still in uniform, balancing a paper plate in one hand. "Colonel," he said with a grin, "you've turned this HOA into a festival." "Think the mayor's jealous." "Good," I said. "Maybe he'll relax some zoning laws." He chuckled. "Oh, and by the way, your training exercise inspired the county to launch a new civic program. They're calling it Operation Neighborly. It's basically veterans volunteering to help maintain rural communities. You're the unofficial mascot." I laughed. Guess there are worse legacies. As the sun dipped low, painting everything gold, I took a walk to the edge of the lake behind the neighborhood. The reflection shimmered like molten glass. A few kids were skipping stones. Their laughter rippled across the water. I thought about all the battles I'd fought in my life, real ones, the kind where lives were at stake. And then I thought about this strange little war over fences and paint colors. Different weapons, same principle: stand firm, stay calm, fight fair. It hit me then what this whole saga had really been about. Not revenge, not victory, but boundaries. Literal, legal, emotional boundaries. knowing where your land ends and your dignity begins, knowing when to push back and when to simply stand and let the other person exhaust themselves. I watched the sky turn amber and said quietly to myself, boundaries don't protect property, they protect peace. Daisy barked softly beside me, tail wagging as if agreeing. When the first stars appeared, I mounted Ginger and rode home slowly. The air was cool, the night gentle. The glow from Silver Creek faded behind me until it was just another patch of warm light in the valley, a neighborhood finally learning to breathe again. At the ranch gate I stopped, looked back, and whispered Semper Fi. Not as a slogan, as a prayer. If there's one thing I've learned through all this, it's that respect is the foundation of any community, whether it's a battlefield, a neighborhood, or a family. Power without empathy turns into tyranny. And silence in the face of unfairness only teaches bullies that they're winning. You don't need to shout, fight, or break the law to stand your ground. Sometimes all it takes is knowing your rights, holding your composure, and refusing to be intimidated by someone hiding behind false authority. And when you finally reclaim your peace, don't gloat. Build something better in its place. Because true victory isn't about proving someone wrong. It's about creating a world where you no longer have to. So if you've ever dealt with your own HOA, Karen, remember this story. Protect what's yours, stay calm, and let the truth do the heavy lifting. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Where are you watching from, and have you ever had to stand up for yourself against unfair rules? Drop it in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more true-life HOA stories of justice, laughter, and poetic revenge.